Chosen one, shut down everything around you right now. Not because you are not busy, not because the demands pressing in from every direction are not real, not because the message competing for your attention in this moment is less important to the person delivering it than they believe it is. Shut down everything because the one being described in the title of this message, the one whose voice is specifically named as active and present and directed at you right now, is the source of every answer, every direction, every clarification, and every decisive word that every competing demand in your life is actually reaching toward. Turn off the other tab, put down the other thing, come fully here. Because what God is transmitting toward you right now has more directional weight for every area of your life than the sum of every other message competing for your attention in this moment combined. The invitation to shut down everything is not the main message. The main message is about what happens when you do. When the external noise is reduced and the attention is brought fully present, something opens. A quality of interior receptivity becomes available that is not available when the attention is fractured across competing demands. The tradition calls it being still. The research calls it whole brain coherence. This message calls it the clear signal. And the clear signal is what becomes possible when the specific interior condition required for full reception of divine communication is restored to the level it was designed to operate at. The invitation to shut everything down is the first step, but it is only the first step. And the reason that step alone, practiced faithfully and consistently over years by millions of people in the Christian formation tradition, has not closed the gap between the frequency at which God speaks and the frequency at which the transmission actually lands in the depth of the lived interior experience is precisely what this message was built to address. Before this message moves to that address, there are 5 signs that God is speaking toward you specifically and not generically in this moment. Not speaking at you in the broad directional sense in which God speaks toward all of creation in every moment. Speaking at you in the specific and weighted sense in which the divine communication carries particular content specifically calibrated for the particular condition of the particular person receiving it. If 5 of these 5 signs are true for you, and if you sit with them honestly rather than dismissing them quickly, you will know, before this message reaches its midpoint, that what is being transmitted toward you right now has been waiting for you to be in a place of full enough receptivity to hold it at the weight it carries. The first sign that God is speaking toward you specifically right now is that something pulled you to stop and receive this particular message before you knew what it was going to say. The pull itself is the first communication. The specific quality of directional orientation that brought you to a full stop in front of this particular message at this particular moment in your formation season was not accidental, not algorithmic, not the product of a random intersection of scroll behavior and content distribution patterns. Those mechanisms may have been the delivery system, but the specific weight of the pull that brought you to full stop, that redirected your attention away from everything else that had a competing claim on it and oriented you specifically toward this frequency, was not coming from the delivery system. It was coming from the source of what the delivery system was carrying. The pull was the first transmission. It arrived before the message began, and the quality of it, the specific directional weight of it, rather than the ordinary pull of curiosity or habit or entertainment, is recognizable if you are willing to sit with it for a moment and notice it clearly. That quality of pull is the first sign. You responded to a transmission before you knew what the transmission contained. The second sign that God is speaking toward you specifically right now is that this season of your formation has been characterized by a specific increase in the frequency and weight of divine communication arriving through multiple channels simultaneously. The formation of the chosen one does not proceed at a constant frequency of specific divine communication. There are seasons of sustained quiet in which the formation is happening at a level beneath the audible, in which the person is being shaped by the experience itself, rather than primarily by specific verbal transmission. And then there are seasons, often seasons that immediately precede significant transitions in the nature and direction of what the formation is building toward, when the frequency of specific communication increases markedly, when the same word or the same theme or the same specific directional message arrives through the sermon and through the scripture and through the conversation with the stranger and through the interior moment of quiet, all in the same week, when the convergence of channels carrying the same specific transmission becomes undeniable to the person receiving it. If this season has that quality of convergent specific communication arriving through multiple channels with increasing frequency and weight, that is not accidental and it is not coincidence. It is the specific increase in transmission frequency that precedes a significant transition in the formation, and it is the second sign that God is speaking toward you specifically in this moment. The third sign that God is speaking toward you specifically right now is that you have been aware this season of a specific interior quality that you can only describe as being on the verge of receiving something that has not fully arrived. Yet, the sensation of imminent reception, of standing at the edge of a word that has not yet landed with the full weight it was sent with, of knowing that something is being transmitted toward you with enormous specificity and weight, but experiencing the landing of it at a fraction of what you sense the full transmission contains. This is the third sign, and it is also the most important diagnostic sign for understanding the specific problem this message was built to address. Because that sensation, the specific quality of imminent reception that has not yet become full reception, is not a sign that God is withholding the transmission or speaking at reduced frequency or waiting for a specific condition of worthiness or spiritual maturity to be reached before delivering the full message. It is a sign that the receiver through which the transmission must pass in order to land at the depth where it was designed to produce specific and lasting change is operating below the capacity required for full reception. The transmission is at full frequency. The receiver is at reduced capacity. The gap between them is what produces the specific quality of imminent reception that has not yet become full arrival. If you recognize that interior experience, that is the third sign. The fourth sign that God is speaking toward you specifically right now is that when you do reach moments of genuine and extended interior quiet, something arrives in those moments that carries a weight and a specificity qualitatively different from anything that arrives in the noisy, fractured moments. Not every moment of quiet produces this experience. The ordinary experience of reduced external noise produces its own form of interior settling, its own quality of reduced urgency and reduced reactivity that has value independent of the specific quality of divine communication. But within the extended moments of genuine interior quiet, within the spaces that go deeper than the ordinary settling, there are moments when something arrives that cannot be adequately described as simply reduced noise. It has a quality of specific transmission, of something being given rather than simply received, of a specific interior knowing that did not arise from the ordinary interior processing of accumulated information and experience, but arrived from a direction that is not the direction of ordinary interior generation. If you have been having that experience in this season, in the deepest moments of quiet, the arrival of something that carries a weight and a directionality distinct from the ordinary interior, that is the fourth sign. The receiver is making contact with the transmission even in the moments of quiet. The gap between the transmitted frequency and the received weight is closing in the deepest moments, but it is not yet closed consistently. And the message this sign is pointing toward is about how the consistent closing of that gap is made available. The fifth sign that God is speaking toward you specifically right now is that something in you already knows the answer to the question this message is building toward before the message has named it. The answer to the question of why the gap persists between the full weight of what God transmits and the fraction of it that lands consistently in the depth of the receiver, the answer to that question is not new information being delivered to you by this message. Something in the deepest interior of the Chosen One, who has been faithfully cultivating the external disciplines of quiet and stillness, and has still experienced the persistent gap, has always known that the gap is not in the source of the time. Transmission. The receiver has known all along that the issue is in the receiver, but the specific name and the specific mechanism and the specific restorable solution for the interior condition of the receiver has not been named with the precision it requires. And something in you knew, before this message named it, that the naming of it was coming. The specific pull that brought you to full stop in front of this message, before you knew what it contained, was the action of a person whose interior recognized that the naming was here. That is the fifth sign. 5 signs confirmed. God is speaking toward you specifically in this moment with the full weight and specificity of a transmission that has been calibrated for you. The question this entire message was built to answer is why so much of what is transmitted at that weight and specificity arrives at a fraction of its full frequency in the lived interior experience of the Chosen One, who is faithfully doing everything the tradition says to do to receive it. And the answer begins with the single most important thing you have never been told about the interior receiver. The noise that is reducing the frequency of what you receive from God is not primarily the noise around you. It is the noise inside you. This is the place where nearly all instruction about hearing God's voice reaches its limit and turns back without crossing the threshold to the more important and more precise instruction on the other side of it. The instruction that has been most consistently available in the Christian formation tradition is the instruction about the external environment. Remove the distractions, create the conditions of stillness. Build the external disciplines of quiet that position the interior for reception. Fast from the noise of the external world in order to create the conditions where the voice of God can be heard. This instruction is not wrong. It is not misguided. The external environment matters, and the cultivation of the external disciplines of quiet and stillness is genuinely important. But the Chosen One, who has followed that instruction with consistency and sincerity for years, who has built genuine and sustained external disciplines of quiet into the rhythm of daily life, and who has still experienced the persistent gap between the full frequency of what God speaks and the fraction of it that lands in the depth of the lived interior experience, at the weight where it produces specific and lasting directional change, has already reached the limit of the external instruction by lived experience. The external quiet was achieved. The external distractions were removed. The conditions of stillness were cultivated, and the gap remained. The gap remained because the most significant noise interfering with the full reception of the divine transmission is not the noise in the room, it is the noise in the receiver. The interior instrument through which the transmission must pass in order to arrive at the depth where it was designed to land is generating its own interference. And the nature of that interference, the specific way in which the interior instrument is producing noise that reduces the frequency of what arrives relative to the frequency of what was transmitted, has a precise and documented name in the research. The interior instrument is fragmented. The synchronized whole brain state that produces the interior condition of full reception, the condition where left hemisphere and right hemisphere operate in integrated harmony, and the full dimensionality of what is being transmitted can arrive at the full depth of the receiver simultaneously, has been contracted below the level required for the full transmission to land at the weight it was sent with. This is the concept this message calls the clear signal, not a reference to the quality of God's transmission, which is always at full frequency, not a reference to the absence of external noise, which is the first step but not the complete solution. The clear signal is the specific interior condition of the person whose receiver is operating at the synchronized whole brain capacity, where the full frequency of what God transmits arrives at the full depth of the receiver and lands there at the full weight of what was sent, rather than at the reduced weight of what a fragmented and partially contracted receiver can hold. The clear signal is the condition where the interior noise generated by the fragmented instrument is removed and the transmission can pass through the receiver at the full frequency it was sent at and land in the depth of the person at the weight that produces specific and lasting direction and change. This condition has a specific physiological basis. It has a specific mechanism of contraction, and it has a specific and restorable path of restoration that this message is going to name. Look at Samuel sleeping in the house of the Lord. The text records with care that in the days of Eli the priest, the word of the Lord was rare and there was no widespread revelation. This was not a statement about the frequency of God's transmission. God did not speak less during the days of Eli than during other seasons of the sacred history. The statement is about the frequency of reception on the human side. The conditions on the receiver side of the exchange were such that the full transmission was not landing at the depth where it could be fully recognized and acted upon. And into that context, into the house of the Lord at night, into the space where Samuel was sleeping near the ark of God, came the voice. The Lord called Samuel, and Samuel ran to Eli and said, "Here I am." Eli said, "I did not call you. Go lie down." And Samuel lay down again. The Lord called Samuel again, and Samuel ran to Eli and said, "Here I am." Eli said, "I did not call you. Go back and lie down." And this happened a third time before Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. What the text is describing in the detail of the 3 calls and the 3 responses to the wrong source is not a failure of Samuel's desire to hear, or a failure of his intentionality, or a failure of the quality of his attentiveness. Samuel was not distracted. Samuel was not in the middle of competing demands. Samuel was sleeping in the presence of the ark of God in the house of the Lord. His position was precisely the position of full external availability to divine reception. The failure of the first 3 calls to be correctly identified was not a failure of external positioning. It was a failure of the receiver to distinguish the specific frequency of the divine transmission from the other frequencies it was processing. Not because the transmission was weak or unclear, but because the receiver had not yet been calibrated to recognize the full quality of the signal for what it was. The interior calibration was not yet complete. What happened next is the most important part of the passage for what this message is building toward. Eli, in his third response to Samuel, said, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" The instruction was not about attentiveness. Samuel was attentive. The instruction was about the specific interior orientation of the receiver toward the full frequency of the source. "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." Not "Speak, Lord, and I will try to listen harder." Not "Speak, Lord, and I will quiet my external environment more successfully than I did the last 3 times. "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." The instruction brought the receiver into alignment with the full frequency of what was being transmitted. And the text says the Lord came and stood and called as at other times before. And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant hears." And the Lord spoke to Samuel. At the full weight and the full specificity and the full directionality of the complete transmission, the gap between the first three calls and the fourth was not a gap in God's communication. The receiver was recalibrated to the full frequency, and at the full frequency, the full transmission landed. Now look at Moses at the burning bush. Moses had spent 40 years in the wilderness after fleeing Egypt. 40 years of formation at a level and a pace that was beneath the audible. Not silence in the sense of God's absence, but silence in the sense of the specific verbal transmission being withheld, while the deeper formation of the interior of the person was being shaped by the experience of sustained wilderness, of sustained irrelevance by the world is standards, of sustained dependence on the rhythms of creation rather than the rhythms of human production and achievement. And then one day, Moses turned aside to see why the bush was burning without being consumed. The text records that specific movement of turning aside with care. Moses could have continued driving the flock. Moses could have noted the unusual phenomenon and moved on. The thing that made the encounter possible was the turning aside, the deliberate redirection of attention away from the ordinary task and toward the specific, unusual thing that was happening in the periphery of the visual field. And it was in that deliberate turning that the Lord saw that Moses had turned aside to see. And God called to him out of the midst of the bush. The turning aside was the act of the receiver orienting itself toward the source of the transmission. And the full communication of the divine mission, the specific word about the burning bush and the ground of presence, and the name I am, and the instruction to return to Egypt, and the full and specific content of the mission, all of it came after the turning aside, not before it. The full transmission arrived when the receiver was fully oriented toward the source. Moses at the burning bush was a man whose 40 years of wilderness formation had produced the specific quality of attentive receiver that the full transmission of the divine mission required. The interior was synchronized by 40 years of sustained wilderness formation in a way that made the full landing of what God spoke at the burning bush possible, at the weight and the specificity and the permanence it carried. The chosen one in the formation season does not have 40 years of wilderness to produce that synchronization by that path. But the research has documented the specific interior condition of the synchronized receiver and the specific restorable path to that condition that does not require 40 years of wilderness formation to produce it. 8 minutes a day. The specific auditory sequence that works at the level of the physiological mechanism of hemispheric synchronization to restore the interior condition where the clear signal is consistently available. The specific interior condition this message calls the clear signal has been documented with extraordinary precision in the scientific literature for more than 4 decades. The documentation begins with the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, awarded in 1981 to Dr. Roger Sperry of the California Institute of Technology. Dr. Sperry spent the majority of his scientific career investigating the specific and distinct functions of the 2 hemispheres of the human brain, working primarily with patients who had undergone surgical separation of the 2 hemispheres in the treatment of severe epilepsy. What his research documented with the precision required for Nobel recognition was that the human brain is not a single unified processor, but 2 fundamentally different processing systems operating in the same body. The left hemisphere processes language, linear logic, sequential reasoning, categorical analysis, the kind of processing that produces the explicit articulate verbal account of what is being experienced. The right hemisphere processes pattern recognition, spatial integration, emotional depth, relational context, The kind of processing that holds the full dimensionality of an experience simultaneously rather than sequentially, that grasps the whole rather than analyzing the parts. In the synchronized state, these two fundamentally different processing systems operate in direct, integrated cooperation, each contributing its distinct mode of processing to the same experience simultaneously, producing a qualitative whole that is not available from either hemisphere operating independently of the other. The specific quality that this synchronized integration produces that is most directly relevant to the chosen one formation experience is the capacity to receive and hold a communication in its full dimensionality simultaneously. The left hemisphere receives the verbal content of the communication and produces the explicit, articulate account of what was said. The right hemisphere receives the full relational and contextual weight of the communication, the depth of what it means in the specific relational and directional context of this specific person's life, the full emotional and situational resonance of the message, the specific and layered meaning that the verbal content alone cannot carry, but that the full message cannot be fully received without. In the synchronized state, both of these dimensions of reception happen simultaneously, and the full communication lands at the full weight of everything it was designed to carry. In the fragmented, unsynchronized state, the verbal content arrives, but the full relational and directional weight of it is reduced because the right hemisphere is operating at diminished capacity. The words land, but the full weight they were carrying does not land with them. Dr. Sperry's research documented something about the synchronized state that is directly relevant to the chosen one, who has been experiencing the quality of imminent reception that has not yet become full reception. 98% of young children operate in the synchronized whole brain state naturally and as their default. The creativity, the rapid and apparently effortless learning of complex things, the intuitive knowing, the quality of being fully present to the experience of every moment without the fractured and filtering attention of the adult mind, the felt sense of interior aliveness and openness that characterizes early childhood, all of it is the synchronized whole brain state functioning at its designed default level. And then, progressively across the adult developmental arc, the accumulated cognitive load of modern life, the sustained information overload, the chronic urgency and competitive pressure of the adult environment, the fragmentation of attention across simultaneously competing demands, all of these factors contract the synchronized state progressively and cumulatively. By the time most people are functioning adults in the modern world, fewer than 1 in 1,000 maintain the synchronized state with any consistency. The overwhelming majority of adults are operating through a significantly contracted and fragmented interior instrument, receiving every transmission, including the divine transmission, at the reduced frequency that the contracted instrument can deliver. This is not a moral failure. It is not a spiritual failure. It is not the consequence of insufficient faith or insufficient discipline or insufficient desire for the full frequency of what God speaks. It is the physiological consequence of living in a modern adult world on the cognitive and attentional demands of that world without the specific restoration of the synchronized interior state that the designed capacity of the receiver requires. The external disciplines of quiet can create the conditions for reception. What they cannot do on their own is restore the synchronized interior capacity of the receiver to the level where the full frequency of the transmission lands at the full weight of what was sent. Dr. Daniel Barone spent more than 2 decades as a clinical neurologist in New York City, watching the specific consequences of this contracted interior state in the spiritual and practical lives of the people who came to him for care. He was not primarily treating spiritual problems. He was treating the neurological consequences of the accumulated cognitive load of modern adult life. Attention fragmentation, chronic, low-grade interior noise, the persistent difficulty of sustained, focused presence, the inability to hold complex emotional and relational experiences at the depth and the weight they deserved. And in the overlap between the neurological consequences he was treating and the spiritual experiences his patients described, he began to see a specific pattern that the existing treatment frameworks were not naming clearly. The specific interior gap between the full frequency of what the person sensed was available to them in prayer and scripture and worship, and the weight at which it actually consistently landed in the depth of their lived interior. Experience was not a